the structure of Indian banking and its current status. In our previous video, we saw how India had a basic system of banking since ancient times and how it evolved. We also looked at the history of the modern banking system along with various kinds of banks in India. India has a very wide range of banks, from state-owned PSU banks, large private banks, foreign banks with long operating history in India, to specialized banks like development banks and small finance banks. Before we learn more about this industry, we urge you to like this video and subscribe to this channel for more videos like this. And do not forget to hit the notification bell. Let's talk about the market size. The Indian banking system consists of 12 public sector banks, 22 private sector banks, 44 foreign banks, 43 regional rural banks, 1,484 urban cooperative banks, and 96,000 rural cooperative banks in addition to cooperative credit institutions. We have earlier profiled some of the major private sector banks and the State Bank of India. We will continue to present profiles of some more prominent players. One of the major goals of the government policy has been bringing banking to remote areas and to the common man. While the 1970s and 80s saw a large branch expansion of PSU banks, in recent years the focus has been enlarging network of ATMs in India. As of September 2022, the total number of ATMs in India reached 2,17,308, out of which 49.81% are in rural and semi-urban areas. Besides this, in the last 20 years, there has been increasing use of technology to bring banking to the common man. The government has encouraged access to banking to every citizen through schemes like PM Jan Dhan Yojana. Now, with increasing digitalization, the government is committed to making banking accessible to everyone. While the banking industry in India has grown rapidly and bank assets across sectors increased, total assets across the banking sector, including public and private sector banks, increased to $2.67 trillion in 2022. In 2022, total assets in the public and private sector banks were $1,594.51 billion and $925.05 billion respectively. Even with these impressive numbers, perhaps the size of our banking industry is much smaller than other countries in relation to the size of the economy. We have only one bank, the State Bank of India, in the top 100 banks by assets globally. The global banking industry is estimated to have deposits of over $150 billion. So, the deposits held in Indian banks are not even 2% of the global banking industry. As the Indian economy matures, we expect a very sharp increase in the size of the Indian banking industry. RBI has decided to set up a Public Credit Registry (PCR), an extensive database of credit information accessible to all stakeholders. The Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code Amendment Ordinance 2017 Bill has been passed and is expected to strengthen the banking sector. Rising income is expected to enhance the need for banking services in rural areas and therefore drive the growth of the sector. Additionally, as of June 1, 2022, the number of bank accounts opened under the government's flagship financial inclusion drive, Pradhan Mantri Jan Dhan Yojana, reached 45.60 crores, and deposits in the Jan Dhan bank accounts totaled 1.68 trillion rupees, which translates to $21.56 billion. India is the world's largest market for Android-based mobile lending apps, accounting for approximately 82% of all online lenders worldwide, and the country currently has 887 active lending apps. The digital payments revolution is expected to trigger massive changes in the way credit is dispersed in India. Debit cards have radically replaced credit cards as the preferred payment mode in India after demonetization. In November 2022, Unified Payments Interface (UPI) recorded 7.30 billion transactions worth rupees 12.11 trillion, which translates to 148.63 billion US dollars. Now let's talk about growth. During financial year 2016 to financial year 2021, bank credit increased at a CAGR of 0.62%. As of financial year 2022, total credit extended surged to 1,532.31 billion US dollars. The growth in credit has been somewhat sluggish after years of expansion. Banks have focused on improving their balance sheets. Today, the Indian banking sector has the cleanest and strongest balance sheet amongst major companies. This sector is ready to take on the recent challenges due to volatility in the interest rates and sluggish economic growth globally. In August 2021, RBI developed Financial Inclusion Index to measure the level of financial inclusion across the country. The FI index measured from 43.4 in financial year 2017 to 53.9 in financial year 21. In March 2022, bank credit grew by 8.59% and the deposits were up by 8.94%. As of November 4, 2022, bank credit stood at 129.26 lakh crore rupees, which translates to 1,585.09 billion US dollars. Access to banking system has also improved over the years due to persistent effort from government to promote banking technology and promote expansion in unbanked and non-metropolitan regions. At the same time, India's banking sector has remained stable despite global upheavals, thereby retaining public confidence over the years. Strong growth in savings amid rising disposable income levels are the major factors influencing deposit growth. According to RBI, the performance of Indian banking sector improved in financial year 2020 as lenders reported a profit on an aggregate basis after 2 years of losses. According to the RBI, bank deposits stood at rupees 173.70 trillion rupees, which translates to 2.12 trillion US dollars as of November 4, 2022. Now let's talk about key statistics. Assets. In 2020-2022, bank assets across sectors increased. Total assets across the banking sector, including public and private sector banks, increased to 2.67 trillion US dollars in 2022. In 2022, total assets in the public and private banking sectors were 1,594.51 billion US dollars and 925.05 billion US dollars respectively. And the assets of public sector banks accounted for 59.53% of the total banking assets. The asset quality of Indian banks and those in Southeast Asian countries is expected to be stable in 2023 as per Moody's Investors Service. Indian banks will benefit from a stable operating environment and significant improvements in their solvency metrics. The rising interest rates amid high inflation will lead to gradual increases in margins, supporting banks' revenue. On the other hand, higher debt servicing costs and slowing economic growth pose asset risks for banks, although they are well positioned to cope with potential growth in problem loans thanks to prudent underwriting standards and ample reserves. Now let's talk about interest income. Public sector banks accounted for over 57% of interest income in 2022. The interest income of public banks and private banking sector reached $89 billion and $59.1 billion respectively in 2022. Now let's see the other income aspects. In 2022, public sector banks accounted for about 50.64% of other income. Other income for public sector banks and private banking sector stood at $15.40 billion and $12.73 billion respectively in 2022. Now let's talk about credit. The credit deposit ratio stood at 70.64% as of January 2022, and as per the RBI rules, banks must set aside 4.50 of deposits as cash reserve ratio and another 18% in statutory liquidity ratio compliant holdings. So the banks have sufficient headroom for growth in credit. Let's discuss digital lending. As stated, India is the world's largest market for Android-based mobile lending apps, accounting for approximately 82% of all Indian lenders worldwide. India's digital lending stood at $110 billion in financial year 2019. Furthermore, digital lending to micro, small and medium enterprises, MSMEs, in India is expected to reach $100 billion by 2023. Now let's talk about capital adequacy, portfolio quality and margins. The banks in India currently have their non-performing loans at the lowest levels historically. Further, their capital adequacy ratio has been in the 15.8 to 16% range. This is much higher than the required 11.5%. The net interest margin in India is 3.18%. This is amongst the highest, and the banking industry has reasonably strong profits. In conclusion, we would say the Indian banking sector has come a long way and is an integral part of the whole financial system. It affects the country's economy by providing investment, credit and infrastructure. The banking sector plays a significant role in the economic growth and development of any country and has emerged as a resurgent sector of the economy. The Indian banking is robust as all the NPAs are usually provided for so long as we can say that the banks are prepared for the next few years. It continues to grow and reach the remotest parts of the country to ensure that the development of the country can be inclusive and be experienced by the people of the country holistically. Thank you. For more such content, like, share and subscribe to our channel and don't forget to press the bell icon.